Tonight we are looking at 3 horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. A storm seals 3 scientists inside Sima Humboldt, the sinkhole that grows its own forest. A soaked hydrologist walks 5 hours through Škocjan against a clock ticking inside his own body. And a diver loses her mask a quarter-mile inside Wookey Hole and must swim home with her eyes shut. Each story starts with confidence and ends in chaos. As always, viewer discretion is advised. True. On March 3, 2026, Lina Vasquez stepped off the rim of Sima Humboldt in Venezuela into warm, rising air, a sinkhole in the roof of a jungle tabletop mountain 300 meters deep, and the only sinkhole that grows an isolated forest on its own floor. The plan gave them 3 days on the bottom: sample the forest, log the species, and climb the fixed rope out before the resupply window closed. Lina was 29 years old, a field biologist who had logged 6 expeditions on the tepuis, the youngest scientist her institute had ever sent to lead one. Her field kits were a running joke and a legend. Everything doubled, everything bagged, everything weighed, because on a tepui, she liked to say, the weather owns your calendar, you only rent it. That morning she rented 3 clear days from a radar picture and led 2 colleagues over the edge on ropes rigged by the support team above. Here is what you need to understand about Sari Nyama. The mountain makes its own sky. Warm jungle air climbs its walls all day, cools, and builds clouds from nothing. A tepui can stand in sunshine at breakfast and inside a rain cloud by noon. And the sinkhole in its roof behaves like a well in a storm. The walls run with waterfalls, the ropes drink, and the climb out becomes a problem you do not attempt. The floor is safe. The wall is the trap. The descent was the finest hour of her career. 300 meters of free-hanging rope down a green wall, swifts whistling past her helmet, the lost forest rising to meet her boots like a landing on another planet. 2 days of work ran like a dream. New beetles, unmapped orchids, a forest that had answered to nobody for 10,000 years. On the 3rd morning, that is when the mountain took the sky back. A gray ceiling sliding across the mouth of the pit, quiet as a closing lid, and with it, the climb had already failed, because the walls of a tepui pit run like drains in rain. By noon, the walls were running, and the ropes hung inside waterfalls. A tepui storm does not fall into the pit so much as pour down its sides. What she didn't know, watching the resupply window shrink, the radar's 3 clear days had just become a wet week, and this delay would eat their food, their fuel, and then, if she let it, their judgment. The rain settled in to stay, and the RIM team radioed the forecast. 6 wet days. They were stuck. Panic asked about the ropes, and the ropes were the one true danger on the floor of a green well, because a soaked wall climb is how sinkhole strandings become sinkhole funerals. The rule on the bottom is brutal and simple. You do not climb into a waterfall. 3 people, 4 days of food, 1 storm with no calendar, and a wall too high to argue with. Watch Lina's ledger under the lid. 4 days of rations, stretched to 8 by decree before the first wet lunch. A RIM team that could lower supplies but not people. Their first supply line jammed 80 meters down and had to be hauled back and reflaked. And 2 colleagues watching their leader do arithmetic in a notebook, in a forest going dark under a storm. She ran the strand like a field season. Camp moved under an overhang 30 meters back from the wall, rations halved, work continued. Because a biologist trapped in an unstudied forest is also a biologist alone with a miracle. Put yourself on that dark floor for 1 evening of it. 6 days of rain hissing in the canopy above your tarp. The wall you came down running like a drain. And your leader across the stove, filling notebook pages by headlamp, pricing the storm in species instead of fear. At 2 days, the RIM team lowered a drum of food and fuel on 400 meters of static line. At 4 days, the waterfalls thinned to threads. At 5 days, she stood at the base of the rope with a hand on the sheath, reading the water like a climber reads rock. At 6 days, the wall gave them a window of 8 hours. They climbed on the 6th morning through that window, 300 meters of soaked rope and dripping wall, Jumars slipping, 60 meters an hour, nobody hurrying. Lena came over the rim last, into wind and sunlight, 9 days after she had rented 3 from the radar, and the rim team pulled the ropes up behind her like the mountain's drawbridge. In her pack were 40 pages of notes, 6 sealed sample tubes, and the driest joke of the expedition. The weather had failed them, she said, but the calendar had only been rented anyway. All 3 survived, and the expedition report ruled the stranding a model response and printed her ledger as doctrine. Rations halved on day 1, 0 rope attempts in water, 9 days paid for 3, and a species list that made the Institute forget the overrun entirely. The only sinkhole that grows its own forest still builds its own sky most afternoons, and the ropes still come up behind every team like a drawbridge. Lena briefs each new scientist with the same sentence before they go over the edge, and it is the storm's sentence, not hers. The weather owns your calendar down there. Rent your days one at a time, all 300 meters of the way down, and never, ever climb into a waterfall to get one back. True. On January 17, 2026, Daniel Rook walked into the cold breath of Škocjan in Slovenia, the deepest underground river canyon in Europe, a gorge inside a mountain where the Reka River thunders 100 meters below the path, and bridges cross a dark so big it has its own wind. He went in with 2 colleagues on the winter monitoring round. Read the river gauges, service the sensors, 5 hours from the entrance and 5 hours back. Daniel was 35 years old, a hydrologist who had logged 6 winters on the underground Reka, the man who knew the river's moods the way farmers know sky. His colleagues teased him for one soft spot. He never rushed a reading, and he never skipped one either. Every gauge, every trip, his fiancée's dinner going cold in Divača while he finished the row. The plan that day was the standard winter round, with the river running high and loud from a week of rain, and 6 degrees in the canyon air. Here is what you need to understand about winter in a wet cave. The river does not have to keep you to finish you. At 6 degrees, a soaked man loses heat 30 times faster than a dry one, and the body pays for it from a small fixed account. Core temperature falls about 1 degree an hour in wet clothes underground, and the account does not take deposits. The doctrine is one line: a wet caver is a casualty who has not noticed yet. The round ran its usual music for the first 3 gauges. Boots on the tourist path, then past the gates into the wild canyon, the river booming below, spray hissing off the rapids and drifting in the lamp beams like slow smoke. Gauge 4 sat where it always sat, across the old low traverse, a ledge above the water that the winter round used to shortcut the high path. At the traverse, that is when the river showed its week of rain. The ledge glazed with spray, the water 2 meters closer than any winter he had known it, because a wet January upstream owns this canyon, and the old safe margin had already failed. The high path would cost 40 minutes, and the reading was 20 meters away, because the shortcut had always held, and the row had never once gone unfinished. What he didn't know, stepping onto the glazed ledge, the river had already made this decision for him. And that choice would start a clock inside his own body, the one account in the canyon that only ever runs down. His boots skated off the glaze, and the Reka took him to the chest. His colleagues had him in seconds. The clock had already failed him. Out in under a minute, wet through, 6 degrees. Because this is the arithmetic of cold. The river only needed 1 minute of him, and it had taken nothing he could see. No wound, no break, no blood. It had simply opened the account. 5 hours from the entrance, wet to the chest, 6 degrees of moving air. Watch the ledger they built on the ledge. Wrung clothes, a spare fleece, 1 foil blanket from Daniel's own doubled kit, hot sugared tea from the flask, rationed by the cup, and a 5-hour walk that doctrine said to attempt at once. A wet man moving generates heat. A wet man waiting only spends it. They moved fast and correctly, boots scraping the wet path, one colleague ahead to raise the alarm at the gate, one at Daniel's shoulder counting his answers. Name, date, gauge numbers, the field test for a cooling brain. Put yourself inside that walk for 1 hour of it. Your clothes a cold second skin. The canyon wind whistling through the bridges, finding every seam. And a voice beside you asking easy questions that keep, somehow, getting harder. At 2 hours, his shivering was violent and his answers held. At 3, the shivering faded, and the colleague at his shoulder heard the change and pushed the pace. Because shivering is the furnace, and a furnace that goes quiet has not been fixed. At 4 hours, 1 hour from the gate, Daniel stopped on the path and began, gently and reasonably, to unzip his jacket. He said he was fine now. He said he could feel the warmth coming back. It is the cruelest page in the cold's whole book. At the end, the failing body throws its last blood to the skin, and a freezing man feels warm. Rescuers call it paradoxical undressing, and it is not a recovery, it is a closing statement. The cave rescue met them 40 minutes from the gate, running, with a stretcher and heat packs and a doctor. The alarm had worked, the system had worked, every person in the chain had done their job. Daniel Rook died in the canyon he knew best, an hour from the daylight, warm, by his own last account, for the first time all day. His core had fallen 7 degrees in 5 hours, and the last one closed the account. The inquest ruled the death hypothermia after a survivable immersion, and its verdict has been read at every winter briefing since. The river did not kill him, the 5 hours did. A wet caver is a casualty who is not noticed yet, and the noticing is the rescuer's job, never the casualty's. The low traverse is chained off now, all winters, all water levels, and Gauge 4 is read with a telescope pole from the high path that costs 40 minutes. His fiancée asked the monitoring team for one thing at the funeral, and they have done it every winter since: finish the row. The deepest underground canyon in Europe still makes its own wind above the Reka, and the row still gets finished, by dry men, on the long path, 40 minutes slower and alive. The account, they teach the new ones, takes no deposits. Stay out of the river that is asking for one. True. On November 22, 2026, Imogen Hart slipped into the cold green water beneath the Mendip Hills of England, into Wookey Hole, the first cave that cave divers ever pushed, the flooded birthplace of the whole strange sport, dived continuously since before the Second World War. She was carrying a sensor package to Chamber 20 for the survey team. 40 minutes in, 40 out, along a line she knew like her own staircase. Imogen was 31 years old, a cave diver who had logged 300 dives in 8 years of British sumps. Her club knew her for one drill she never skipped. Every winter, one full practice dive with her mask blacked out, swimming the line by touch alone, a ritual her instructor had beaten into her, and she had never once needed. The plan that morning was a working dive, plain as a post round. 200 bar on her back, deliver the package, log the depth, home for tea. Here is what you need to understand about British sump water. It is not the blue of the postcards. Wookey runs green to brown with peat and winter rain, 8 degrees on a kind day, visibility measured in arm lengths. Divers here grow up on the line the way sailors grow up on rope, because in water like this, your eyes were always the backup system. The line is the primary. It always was. The dive-in ran sweet and quick, down through the show cave chambers, along the old line into the far country, fingers trailing the braid out of habit while her eyes did the easy work. She reached Chamber 20 on schedule, clipped the sensor package to its station, and turned for home with 150 bar and 40 minutes of easy water ahead. In the low bedding plane past the chamber, that is where the cave got crowded. Her exit line pinched close to the ceiling, her own exhaust boiling back along the rock at her face, and the easy exit had already failed, because 40 centimeters of roof turns a diver's own breath against her. She turned her head from the boil, and her mask edge kissed a blade of rock, because a bedding plane gives a diver 40 centimeters and opinions about all of them. What she didn't know flinching from that kiss of stone. The seal was already leaking, and a nudged skirt drinks water, not air. And this habit would now have to swim her home, the blacked-out winter drill she had never once needed, as the next touch of rock raked the mask off her face entirely. 8-degree water hit her eyes like a slammed door. The mask was gone. Panic surged up her spine. Her sight was finished. Her hand found the line. Because this is what mask loss means in a peat-dark sump. Even if her eyes could open against the cold, there was nothing to see. No up, no down, no doorway. A quarter-mile of flooded cave, and every meter of it now a blindfold. 140 bar, 600 meters of line to the daylight. Eyes shut. Watch the ledger she swam inside. Air for roughly 40 minutes at a calm breathing rate. And a cold-shocked diver does not breathe calm for free, she buys it. A buddy 2 body lengths behind, useless as a lighthouse now, priceless as a hand. And one thread of braided nylon running 600 meters through the dark to the only sky she owned. She did what the winter ritual had built her to do. OK signal squeezed onto her buddy's wrist, breathing forced down to the drill's slow count, and the line run through a soft fist, never gripped, never tugged, read like Braille at walking pace. Put yourself inside that swim for 1 minute of it. Freezing water pressing on your closed eyes. The hiss and boil of your own breathing the only landmark left. And 600 meters of trust, paid out 1 arm length at a time through your fingers. At 100 bar, she felt the line kink through the junction and named it out loud in her head, halfway. At 80, her tanks knocked once on the bedding plane ceiling, a dull clang through the water, and she never broke the count. At 60, she felt the line begin to climb. Her buddy's hand closed on her shoulder at the base of the last slope, steering now, and the water over her closed eyes went from black to a red-orange glow. The show cave lights, the tourist side of the water, the color of almost home. Imogen Hart surfaced in Chamber 3 on her own fins, 41 minutes blind, with 50 bar to spare, and sat on the ledge breathing like a sprinter while the tour group's applause pattered off the chamber walls at something they did not understand. She survived on a ritual and a rope, and the club's report ruled the exit a textbook blind egress and printed the numbers that made it one. 600 meters, 41 minutes, 0 line errors. The mask had failed. The ritual had not. The blacked-out mask drill is mandatory in her club now. Every member, every winter, and nobody calls it superstition anymore. The first cave that cave divers ever pushed still runs green and cold under the mendips, and Imogen still dives it, with a spare mask clipped to her arm now, 8 winters of the drill behind her, and a strange fondness for the ritual that saved her. Your eyes were always the backup system, she tells the new divers at the water's edge. The line is the primary. Learn to read in the dark before the dark insists.